Ladies and gentlemen, we are late, I know, but welcome to the second edition of the Conscious Fintech Meetup Berlin. I'm very happy that you're all here, and it's really great that we have the possibility also to have people seeing this live on the good old internet. So we are live streamed today for the first time. We already had a very successful kickoff in March of this series, and today we want to continue the story with a beautiful topic: the good, the bad, and the chain on the ethics of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. But first I want to give you a quick info about why we started this series in the first place. So as you all know, fintech right now are changing the way how banking and finance works, and fintech pressure traditional banks because they make smarter use of technology and because they build very customer-focused services. But beside customer experience, speed and price, I think there's a very critical area where fintech are rarely more innovative than the established players in the financial sector. And this is responsibility, fairness, and the sector's impact on society. Do fintech bring change in these areas? This is the question we want to explore within the series. Are they able to bring change where it's mostly needed within the sector? And in this sense, conscious means for us being aware of context, and it means being deliberate and intentional about your own actions and being aware of the impact of these actions. And when I talk about we, I'm actually talking about Jan, Sanika, and me. Maybe you can stand up for a second and show your beautiful faces to the audience. Thank you very much. So this is Sanika. She's working for the Institute of Social Banking, a partner of the series. She organizes a summer school, which is at the end of June in Estonia, with the topic Future Finance, Banking on Values in a Digital World. So check out the summer school of the Institute for Social Banking. And she just returned from the Money Summit of the GLS Treuhand, which was where she gave a workshop together with Jutta Steiner from Ethereum on blockchain. And then next there is Jan. He's the co-founder of Save to Change, which is an impact-focused micro-savings service. And he's working for Tech Open Air. He's the head of the startup area Tech Open Air, which is taking place at the end of July. No, from the 13th to 15th of July in Berlin. So you're all invited to Tech Open Air, which is like a major meetup of the tech scene in Berlin. Myself, I'm Konstantin. I'm also co-founder of Save to Change, and I work as a business developer for an agency that is doing participatory processes. And we have an expanded team, which is right here. So I have to introduce Christoph. He's a product designer and design manager with brilliant ideas in innovating financial services, and he's today head of the audio and video stuff. Then we have Leon Reiner, who is somewhere there. He's co-founder of Impact Hub, and he's also leading the program Finance for Change at Impact Hub, and he's a great supporter of the series, and we're very thankful that we can be at Impact Hub Berlin the second time now. And then we have Jule Frömmelt. She's a freelance photographer, and she's standing right over there. Thank you for your support. You should check out her works. I really love the one with the Berlin chefs, the series, so just talk to her afterwards. And of course, we have Omar, David, and Flor, and Julia from the C Network, and they support us with streaming us live tonight. Thank you so much. And if you want to join the discussion here also in front of your computer, please do this using the hashtag Conscious Fintech or the chat box on the stream, which is, by the way, c.network/live. If you guys want to share this with your friends at home now, feel free. Okay, we're right there. This is the agenda. So I'll give you a little context why we're talking about blockchain technology and why we think this is important. Then afterwards we have the lecture by Brett Scott and discussion after that, and then we finish with a little networking. Before we begin, usual things, toilets are just around the corner in the back of the venue. Bars are right there at the bar. Drinks are right there at the bar. Chocolate bars next time. Okay, can you switch one more time, please? I told you we had the kickoff in March, and we received a lot of feedback, which would be great topics to talk about. And one mentioned very often was Bitcoin and blockchain. So we thought we continue with this topic, and we are super happy to have Brett here with us. I will give a little intro later on. But now let me give you some little. Okay, I won't explain blockchain, of course not, because you're on here. Okay, let's do it. I borrowed this from Brian Ford. He's the director of the Digital Currency Initiative at MIT Media Lab, and he divided the understanding of Bitcoin and blockchain into 4 levels. The first one is who needs this? This is silly. We have PayPal and stuff. Who needs digital currency? Okay, second is, wow, that sounds interesting. There are smartest people discussing interesting stuff, but I don't get it. It's super complicated. The second level is, okay, got it, somehow. I want to learn more. And the fourth, this is like open. This is nirvana. It's like a very wide, winding path into math and cryptography and stuff. So what I want to know now, are there people actually working with blockchain, researching about it or writing about it that are on this 4th level? Please raise your hands. Who's working with the blockchain or on Bitcoin? Cool, cool, cool. I see 3 or 4 people that all doing like this. So not quite there, great. Who thinks that she or he understood like the basic principles, how the blockchain works, and is interested in this topic? Please raise your hands. Okay, great, that's the majority, thank God. Okay. And I guess there are some people who like find this very interesting and want to learn more, and that's why they are here. But I'm also pretty sure there is no one who thinks that Bitcoin or blockchain doesn't make any sense at all. So, okay, great. The thing is, we don't need all this technical stuff. We want to have a meta discussion about the political, societal, ecological, economic, and so on, personal, etc. implications of blockchain in fintech and beyond. And why we want to do this is, I think it's important because let's first look at like the 2 principles of blockchain. And please, all the professionals, please excuse like the super oversimplification. So first of all, it's a public and distributed database, and this is often referred to as the ledger, and this is opposed to a private account database, which is held by a central institution, for example, a bank. So the ledger is public and visible. It's not central and private. Second thing is the intermediaries that are maintaining these database and that are changing this database. This is a decentralized network of different people around the world, and it is not this one central institution. And this is like the basic principle. Of course, it's much more complicated and complex and interesting to look at, but yeah. And the thing is, through this network of decentralized intermediaries, you can add, for example, Bitcoin transactions to the blockchain, to this ledger. But basically, and this is why it says fintech and beyond, basically you can add any source of data. You can upload that can be stored at the blockchain. And the interesting thing is, once it is uploaded, it can't be changed afterwards. And that makes this really interesting. So in the end, the blockchain enables you to put data, to upload data, and prove the existence of this file, of this data, and prove also the time when it was uploaded. So the potential of this is that it could establish trust between strangers without having this central authority in the middle. So we think about banks, for example, when it comes to Bitcoin, when it comes to fintech, but we can think about state institutions that keep track of land ownership, for example. We can think of businesses that connect people, like Uber, for example. And if you think in this dimension, it gets really clear why this is super important, because it just changes the way how the online world works. And with this, it changes also the way how the offline world works. So it will change corporations, but it also will change a lot of institutions within our society. You can see it as a new generation of the internet, and also the old generation of the internet changed a lot of things within our society. Let's look at the next slide, please, which shows us like the normal, all web services. There's email, then there is the web based on hypertext. There is FTP services, and all these are based on the TCP/IP protocol that lays behind it. And IP just is internet protocol, so this is like the base of it all. The IP address. And when we now think about the blockchain protocol next to this as the base for Bitcoin, for example, so money in this case, but not just money. We talked about land ownership or identity or markets. All this could develop to a new internet, as Melanie Swan says. She's a researcher at the New School and founder of the Blockchain Institute there, and she calls it Internet 1, transfer of information, and Internet 2, transfer of value. So while the Internet 1 is based on communication and on sharing files, sharing information, the Internet 2 for her is based on sharing values. When I realized how this might change a lot of our intermediary institutions, I was able to relate to her observation in this quote, where she says, blockchains qualify as the most important kind of news, something that changes our thinking. We instantly sense that now things might be forever different. I mean, this is like big words, but interesting though. She calls this like a massive new algorithmic reality, and she says we have to like adapt to this new algorithmic reality, and the key question then is, how do we adapt? So can we use this as empowering, or do we have an enslaving relationship to it? So and this is one of the core questions, how we now react to this new situation, to this new algorithmic reality. Please go on one more slide, because there is another quote I want to share with you. It says, at many cryptocurrency meetups, there's an excitable mix of techno bubble infused with social claims. So this somehow attacks the community itself. And this quote actually is from a guy named Brad Scott. And I think we should now try to prove him wrong and have a very informed discussion and deep discussion on these topics. And I'm very happy that he's here tonight to give us a little insight in his thoughts on this topic. And these are some sources you can check out that are very interesting and that are underlying for what I just told you. Now let me tell you little things about Brad before he starts his lecture. He describes himself sometimes as a campaigner, forum, derivatives broker, and general economic explorer, which is a beautiful description. Others may call him more an alternative finance activist or a financial hacker, which is also not too bad. Undoubtedly, he's a keen observer and a critical thinker when it comes to financial technology and its social impact. He writes for publications such as The Guardian or Wired and others, and he published his book, The Heretic's Guide to Global Finance, Hacking the Future of Money, in 2013 with Pluto Press. And for the German speakers, who do not know heretic, I had to look it up. It's a beautiful word. It means andersgläubig, ketzerisch, or abtrünnig. So this is like really nice to have a very heretic guide. Furthermore, Brett is also involved in various financial campaigns, and he's a fellow of the London-based Finance Innovation Lab. And lately he published a working paper with the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development with the beautiful title, How Can Cryptocurrency and Blockchain Technology Play a Role in Building Social and Solidarity Finance? And I think that's quite a good question to start with. Cool. Please welcome Brett Scott.
Hello. I need to get this in quickly. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I got this really awkward, contraption to stick into my pocket. Okay.
Need some help with that?
Should be all right. Can you guys hear me properly? Also, am I going to have to... I might just jump, or I could instruct you. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is my book. It was published in 2013, so it's like a little bit out of date now, but it's still kind of useful. Hey, Carl, how's it going? Actually, Carl over there was the guy who gave me this name for this book. So I'm very indebted to him for that. But yeah, actually, this book is now available as a PDF copy, a pirated PDF copy, if you want to get hold of it. But you can still get the hard copy still. Just go to the next one, please. I do a lot of different work around the financial sector. Here are some groups that I sometimes work with. Sometimes NGOs of various sorts. Sometimes what's called the alternative finance sector, so people who sort of do alternative currency systems and alternative banking stuff. And I actually also work with artists and lots of different people, but basically, and I write for some publications. But I guess the point to take away is I'm not really, I wouldn't say I'm involved with cryptocurrency as like my only thing. It forms part, it's like a subset of my work. And I think maybe it's a little bit different to some people who are normally in the crypto or sort of blockchain communities who spend their entire life in that world. So I sometimes I get to see different people who have different takes on how you sort of change financial systems. And I see the blockchain crew as kind of like one movement within a much broader set of movements around finance. Let's carry on. All right, okay. All right, so Bitcoin, most of you, I think, have some basic idea, but I just want to give some the basic gist of the situation. This is the basic structure of the normal bank payment system. Who feels that they know the normal bank payment system and how it works? Okay. And it's kind of interesting. Bitcoin sometimes defined as being digital currency, but actually most currency is actually already digital. Anytime you use your bank card or any kind of internet banking, you're essentially using digital currency. Actually, in Germany, it's kind of interesting because people are quite into cash, whereas I've just been in the Netherlands and it's completely, everyone just uses cards everywhere. So you'd say that's a digital currency system. And the essence of a digital currency system is essentially that you have people interacting with databases. That's the main thing. You have accounts in a database which keeps score of people's money, or there's a number, your name, and a number associated with it. And then you communicate with the holder of the database and you ask them to edit the entry for you. That's what you're doing every single time you're using your credit card or any kind of system like that. You're essentially feeding messages into the banking sector, asking them to change database entries for you. And this is how the entire payment system works, essentially. And a lot of the fintech startups are trying to sort of add intermediary layers over here. So they say, okay, you can use your phone or use your fingerprint to send a message or whatever. But you're basically trying to add these layers into that existing system. And the basic point is that money in the system moves, quote unquote moves, through the editing of databases. Now bear in mind, nothing actually does move. All that happens is essentially changes in information that then imply that something is kind of like change. So that like the imagined money moving is really something that's like, it's like a mental leap because you've seen a change in two databases that then kind of implies that something jumped between them. In reality, nothing changed. There was nothing physically moving. there was database changes. So that's this, and you look at, and as Konstantin was sort of saying, the key essence of this is that these are private databases controlled by sort of powerful entities who look after them on our behalf, as it were. And the Bitcoin system essentially is not actually that different in how you interact with it, but it's kind of different in its structure. You still send messages into a system asking for a database, as it were, to be changed. The key difference is that there's only a single database and it's public, it's not private, and the people who change it for you are not a cartel of banks, but they're rather a decentralized network of what's called miners, which look basically like techno clerks who sort of alter this list for you, or this database. And you see I've sort of squashed those 4 databases into one, because if you actually took all the banks in society and you took every single one of their private database systems and you squashed them into a single database system, you would see a list of every single transaction that has occurred in the economy, or at least every electronic transaction. So the Bitcoin system starts like that. Is that kind of like clear enough for everyone? And there's a whole bunch of like cryptography and stuff, which is how the system works, but this is the essence of it. And then you kind of interact with this. Sometimes it's called a peer-to-peer currency, which I find a bit dubious, because peer-to-peer suggests direct interactions between 2 people. This actually is not direct. You still notice you have to go via a system to, you send a message into a system saying, please can I move tokens associated with my account to somebody else's account on the system. And then you both have to look at the database to see if it's happened. So it's not something that's actually happened between 2 people. You're basically referring to some third-party thing that's been changed by other people. So it's a decentralized network intermediary. Let's carry on. It's a bit weird, like having that. Normally I like to like jump between slides and kind of backwards and forwards. So a lot of the initial sort of, if you're trying to describe blockchain technology, you can sort of pass out these elements. One of the key elements is this decentralized distributed shared element, all right? And people kind of like jump between these terms. It's a bit ambiguous as to like what the sort of parameters of how distributed relates to decentralized and shared. But the basic idea is not controlled by single, large, powerful, centralized entities. And then so some kind of like, you visualize it with some kind of network structure, all right? That's one descriptive element of a system. The second descriptive element is digital, which basically means rather than it's been written down with pencil on a piece of paper, it's recorded as kind of like charged atoms on a hard drive somewhere that then gets read by some thing to reveal ones and zeros. I mean, we don't have to go into the nature of how binary code works, but this is essentially what digital is. And then the sort of third element is sometimes database ledger. People use these terms to refer to some kind of like information store, okay? Now actually bear in mind that a database or ledger does not have to be digital. There's a long history of paper databases or paper ledgers. So old banking ledgers were essentially just books that you would go in and they would change the books for you rather than changing big account databases. So you can actually logically pass these things away from each other, and then you can start to combine them. So a decentralized digital database or a shared digital ledger. And you'll tend to see people using combinations of these things to describe blockchains, depending on what they're trying to sort of get across to you. And then the question is, okay, well, why do you want that system? So I've used this term structural. You can describe the structure of something, which is something that engineers really like to do. Let me describe the structure of something to you. But then it's like, why is this structure useful to me? Okay, and that's how most people, their immediate sort of intuitive thing is like, okay, cool, but like why? And then you get these sort of descriptions, this sort of a second class of descriptions about blockchain, which is about these functional descriptions saying why this might be useful. And so, for example, this is one way here, a system for coordinating action between a whole bunch of strangers so they can really reach consensus on information without relying on an intermediary. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of like different ways people describe this. They say a shared account of reality between people who don't know each other, or some kind of Yeah, and so those are the kind of basic elements of it, and then we move on to the actual sort of justifications about why this is better. Okay, so now this is like a different thing. You can describe a system, and then you can say why it might be useful, and then you go into a third thing, which is why it's better than other things that do the same. Okay, so these are your normative justifications. And this is where you'll get into the kind of like blockchain evangelists. So they're all saying like why it's so much better than other systems. Okay. So in my sort of world, I tend to come across 4 basic classes of sort of justifications for why the system is better. And I'll sort of go through them quickly. The first one, which actually was part of the original blockchain sort of thing, was this kind of political description about why it was better. And the main claim was, we're going to get away from the politics of central institutions, okay? And there's different people who like that for different reasons. But one of the key communities who really liked that idea were the conservative libertarians. And essentially, I don't know if any of you sort of self-identify as being a conservative libertarian. There's just sort of different strands of this ideology. But essentially, it goes like this, okay? Who of you have read Thomas Hobbes? Okay, it's quite a good book, actually. This is like a really cynical guy. He was writing in like the 17th century. He's got this really like dim view of human nature, and he's like basically like strangers. If they're around each other, they essentially try to swindle each other in various ways. And people get together. They realize that it's in their interest to form a state. And he called this the Leviathan concept. So it's basically like you give up part of your freedom to a sort of a central authority who will then enable all of you to interact with each other. The basic concept is that if you want a market to work and you want strangers to interact with each other, you need them to have some basic ability to trust each other. Okay? Otherwise, they won't actually engage in contract with each other. And so this was, in Thomas Hobbes' conception was, he was coming from this trying to establish liberal philosophy, which is essentially the idea that people are individuals and that you run society as mutual contracts between individuals. Like, I'm not describing it very well, but it doesn't really matter. But historically, there's been a whole bunch of problems about this. And then libertarians essentially want free markets and they want private property, okay? And they understand that in order to have that, you essentially have to have some kind of third-party entity that underpins that for people. In our case, it's a state. So for example, if you walk outside there and you go and buy a coffee, you might not know the person who you're buying a coffee from, but you got some basic sense that even though they're a stranger, there are certain third-party institutions that will protect you if they screw you over in some kind of way. So for example, consumer protection laws or sort of various sort of contracting laws and things. So there's a whole load of this in our society that basically means that strangers are able to interact with each other. Now, in the libertarian philosophy, it's understood that this is a very important part if you want to have actually markets working. But the problem is that the institution required for that is essentially people. Okay, you need human institutions to create this Leviathan, as it were. And this is why in libertarian philosophy there's always been this call for minimal states. So they say what you need a state that protects property rights and contracts and nothing else. That's it. That's all you want. You don't want a state that then actually tries to do other things, for example, make things better or to take things away or to sort of try to alter the society in various things. So this was a sort of key element of libertarian philosophy. When the blockchain came out, what made libertarians really, really excited was this idea of, we've figured out a technological infrastructure that enables strangers to interact with each other, but without relying upon human institutions. Okay, and this is why it was politically very appealing to a lot of libertarians. And I wrote an article about this if you want to sort of read more about this, which I called Techno Leviathan, which I was talking about this infrastructure which mediates relationships between strangers. And so this is a sort of a key part of the original political vision. Any sort of immediate, is that like roughly clear? We don't have to like have it perfect, but if you really want to read it, you can check out that article. Okay, let's go into the second realm of justifications. So apart from all the political stuff, which surrounded a lot of the early debates around Bitcoin and blockchain technology, there's sort of a second realm of sort of debates sort of coming out, which was people saying, okay, you know, screw all the like ideological stuff that people are, you know, ranting on about this. Will this technology be useful in the context of, for example, where centralized infrastructure has broken down? So in the original libertarian vision, it's like, there's a centralized infrastructure, let's break it down into this decentralized one. But like, what happens if you had a country that's in a war zone where de facto the centralized infrastructure has broken down, all right? You might then think, okay, maybe this infrastructure, you know, sort of decentralized things could be useful. Could we, for example, implement some kind of emergency relief system with people using their mobile phones, you know, when all the central databases are broken down. So a lot of international development agencies have been thinking about this type of blockchain technology in this context, which is you know, could a rural collective of, for example, some kind of farmer in countries create a kind of like mutual structure where they insure each other via this technology without relying on banks who don't want to go out there anyway. So there's this whole kind of debate around the sort of use of the technology in sort of vulnerable situations, or sort of and this is a kind of paper I wrote for the UN, which was, can cryptocurrency and blockchain technology play a role in building social and solidarity finance? I kind of go a bit into it in this paper here. Let's go into the next one. More recently, though, this is the third body of justifications that has come out for blockchain. This is and it's going on right now, this is the corporate takeover of blockchain technology. I don't know if you guys have been following the sort of the ins and outs of what's happening, but in the beginning, corporates were not interested really in blockchain. It was this kind of like, you know, marginal libertarians like ranting about the state and stuff. And, you know, like a serious institution like Goldman Sachs was like, well, realistically, we are essentially, you know, we're a large-scale institution. We can't be dealing with that kind of marginal activity. But more recently, it's actually become quite attractive to a lot of corporates. And there's this sort of thinking about, could decentralized or distributed database technology be used to improve business processes in a corporate setting? Now, the key elements, and why I put this slide here, this is R3CEV, which is a particular consortium of about 40 banks who've got together to start to kind of explore this technology. And you can see these different things they're trying to do. Intelligent applications of cryptographic technology based on protocols within global financial markets. Essentially, what they're trying to do is replicate things that banks already do in a slightly more efficient way. So for example, right now, the banks collectively run the payment system together, or they collectively run systems where they exchange shares between each other. And they're thinking, we have these existing ways of doing this. Could we basically implement closed blockchain systems between ourselves that will do it a bit more efficiently? But we'll close them down and sort of re-centralize them and sort of take aspects of blockchain technology in order to basically maintain our cartel. Okay, so this is a really lot of money flowing into this. And interestingly, a lot of the original blockchain people are suddenly sort of discovering that they actually quite like being consultants to these guys here. Their views have suddenly got much milder. They started to wear suits a lot. They're starting to get paid very large amounts of money for consultancy contracts. And essentially, there's a takeover going on, which is, you know, how any kind of business process works. There's a fourth area of normative justification, which is quite obscure, which is aesthetic. If you ever hang around the coder community or the hacker community, you'll see they love this here. It's like the sheer beauty of the code. It's like, no corporate person cares about this. They're like, I don't give a shit if it's beautiful. It's like, will it make my processes more efficient? Or like, will it be, whereas actually a lot of like coders are to say, but it's so elegant the way it's designed. It's just like, it's so kind of, it's just so, yeah, it's like, you know, and that's actually a reason to use it. If you put all these justifications together, sometimes like real blockchain evangelists, they put them all in one, you'll get this thing which is like, this is much more democratic, it breaks down the power of central institutions, It helps really much poorer people in vulnerable situations. It's much more efficient, and it's beautiful at the same time. And these are kind of like all the justifications put into one kind of section. Whether these things actually work together is very questionable. In particular, I'm just going to quickly jump backwards and forwards. Efficiency, it's not obvious that efficiency actually works very well with resilience necessarily. Like these historically are kind of often not in the same thing together. Efficient systems often are actually quite centralized. They're not necessarily resilient. So being able to get like efficiency at the same time as resilience is interesting. And I'm not really sure, well, it remains to be seen if it can be done. I'm just gonna get this water instead. Okay, how much time do I have, by the way? Okay. I'm going to just quickly try and tease out a few sort of thinking points. I'm not going to try to come to a definitive conclusion for you guys on the ethics of blockchain, but I guess I want to throw out some kind of thought points about trying to sort of show the ambiguity of the technology. Now, I actually am quite interested in blockchain technology. I think it's really, I'm very glad that it exists, but I also think there's a lot of uncritical thinking around it. And I think it's actually a very ambiguous technology. It's got different potentialities within it, and I think it's time to start actually seriously thinking about that. And in the context of this conscious fintech movement, I think that's interesting to say, okay, what do we really have here? Let's cut through all the sort of uncritical bullshit about it and actually think about what the limitations and how you might implement it in different situations. So the first thing I was just going to quickly draw out here is actually this. The political vision of conservative libertarians is not shared necessarily by everyone in the blockchain community. Within what you might want to loosely refer to as sort of social anarchist communities, there's often the same critique about centralization. So they say, we do not want centralization in political systems, but there's a different reason for that. So I don't know if you guys ever hang around the anarchist community or the sort of like left-wing anarchist community. But the view is different to the conservative. The conservative libertarian thing is essentially like the state is kind of like destroying my individuality. It's kind of like defensive individualism that's built into conservative libertarianism. It's this quite like protective man with a shotgun kind of mentality. Whereas in anarchist thinking, it has the same critique about these large centralized institutions, but it's rather the point is these large centralized institutions don't allow us to actually truly experience our social nature. Okay, it's not like our individual nature. It's more saying state structures and large corporate structures that go along with them break down human society. They actually alienate people and they corrupt people. And actually what we need to do is break those down so people can relearn actually what true community is and actually understand what their true nature is and de-alienate themselves. It's a bit of a loose description. But these critiques both rely on breaking down centralization. Okay, but they have different reasons for doing that. Let's switch to the next one. So this is like, I guess, my first provocation. If you're ever thinking about why you might want to use blockchain to decentralize something, are you thinking in terms of atoms or molecules? Because I'm not really sure this is like the perfect analogy, but essentially the sort of very individualistic thing is create a decentralized network of atoms, like atomic individuals who interact with each other via this trustless infrastructure. The anarchist vision tends to be about molecules, so groups of people who are bound together and then networked together in a kind of federation. This is like, in anarchist philosophy, is a really big thing. It's like people can only really politically express themselves in small groups in some kind of thing where they can actually interact with people, and then you want to network them together. So when you see these network diagrams, you want to be thinking, do you perceive these nodes here as individual people, or do you perceive them as being sort of groups like us here, for example, engaging in discussion and interacting and then having some kind of dialogue with other nodes in the network? And this kind of actually changes the political dynamic of how you think about blockchain technology. I know this is might be like a little bit abstract, but this is quite different ways of conceptualizing decentralized networks. Now, a friend of mine called Chris Ellis, I was waffling on about this kind of political philosophy stuff with him, and he said, Brett, actually, I kind of get your point, but I think you're missing the point somewhat in the context of the internet. And he's a involved in software engineering, so he's had a lot of past in the actual sort of the coding side of things. And he says, look, in the context of the internet, we've got hundreds of thousands of people who are essentially strangers to each other, okay? Even if you have a positive view of human nature and you don't believe people are essentially trying to screw each other over, in the context of hundreds of thousands of people interacting, you've got to always assume there's going to be a few people who are going to try to screw things over. That's why I, as an engineer, want to try and design systems that have this trustlessness built into them, because I essentially am going to try and protect the average person on the network against bad actors. Okay, so I guess I'm trying to. I want to give credit to the sort of the internet engineering element, which I guess the point was people like Chris do not desire a world which is full of atomic individuals interacting. You know, he lacks community. He lacks the idea of also having communitarianism, but just in the context of the internet, he doesn't believe that that's necessary. You necessarily have that. Okay, so I just want to sort of flag that up. Let's go to the next. Okay, next obscure point. Okay, decentralization. So let's think about the critique of centralization. So in a lot of critiques, either in the libertarian critique or the anarchist critique, you're saying there are these centralized institutions, governments, banks, these like large behemoths that are able to abuse people. Therefore, we want to break them down and decentralize them. Okay, so that makes sense if you don't trust political institutions, right? The problem that comes in though is if you have decentralization, how do you engage in forms of actually changing things or controlling things? Okay, now I want to use an example here, and now this is actually the Borg from Star Trek. The Borg is this like, I don't know if you guys have watched this, but like it's this entity that has no leader, right? But it's like all the sort of like the Borg, I don't know what they're called, but the sort of the different like creatures within it. They all are kind of like a hive mind, like, but no one of them actually controls it, right? But then, so in some ways it seems like a democracy, but then you could also say, well, do any of them have any agency? Like, do they have any ability to do anything if nobody has any control? Okay, so there's this kind of like ambiguity in the situation. And I want to let's take something like Uber. One of the big sort of things that's happening in economies right now is the development of these network corporations, okay, such as Uber. The key thing that Uber relies upon is network effects, okay? It's what we call a network good. It basically means the more people who use it, the more useful it becomes, okay? So you have this platform or this infrastructure that people start to get attracted towards, and they start to actually it becomes an attractor hub. Okay. Now, in some ways, what Uber has done is they've set up a platform of infrastructure, a kind of an infrastructure platform via which people can interact, right? So in some ways, it's democratic in a sense. Okay, so I can become my own, like taxi operator, and people can interact with me. But at the same time, they themselves have they control the underlying infrastructure. Okay, so you've created a system where there's highly centralized control of a network of interaction. Now, if you've got a centralization critique, you say, okay, what we want to do, we want to break down that system, and we want to create that same thing in a decentralized fashion. Okay, but the one thing you know about Uber is that we actually are able to identify who controls it. So if we actually wished to change Uber, we would know exactly who to target, right? We would target a group of 20 probably like 20 to 30-something men in Silicon Valley. And they're probably in the same room together. And you would know exactly where to go to say, your system is currently abusing people in a certain way. We would like you to change it, please. And if you believe in the democratic process and you believe in people's ability to mobilize political action, then that actually could be a situation where you could change an entire network. Now, if that same infrastructure is replicated in a decentralized fashion where there's no one person who's actually technically in control, you might have solved the problem of elites abusing a centralized structure, but you've kind of created a new problem, which is if that hasn't been designed properly, you cannot change it. Okay. You don't know who to target to change the system. And this is a big problem about decentralization. It's like, okay, you've got rid of the head, but you might have got rid of the ability to have any agency or control at the same time. Okay, let's go to the next one. The question then comes in, if you've done that, where does power actually lie in the system? And so I've used this sort of rough thing here, open access without open governance, and in the concept of network effects. Let me try and just explain this why I chose this random slide. Imagine you found yourself in some kind of like magical scenario where some like alien entity had just come down and built this giant road infrastructure for you, and it was just there. And it was like everywhere. It's like, oh, cool. There's no toll roads. You can just use it as you wish. It's an infrastructure for interaction, right? And it's open access, all right? But you also don't know who controls it or how you would change it. And let's, for example, say, and let's say in a decentralized situation, you needed to actually make a shift to its course. There would be no actual entity that you could actually approach to say, how would we change this? You'd have to get everyone in the system to try and collectively agree to change it, which might actually be very, very difficult. What's much more likely to actually occur is either it concretizes and stays the same, in which case the real power lies with the original creators, okay? They've got this latent power which is embedded in the network itself that they have sort of implemented or sort of thrown down in society. Alternatively, it'll be people who have the most access to influence and capital in the system who will be able to make executive decisions around this, right? And actually, you might find the average person in the system is highly alienated and doesn't actually know how to change anything. Now, in the context of Bitcoin, something like this has actually recently happened. There were decisions that had to be made about how you would sort of change the nature of what's called the block size debate, where they're sort of trying to decide the future of how many transactions should be allowed to go through. And essentially, there was no real process for how to do it. Nobody knew how to do any kind of governance in the situation. It's like, we have a decentralized infrastructure, but we have no decentralized decision-making process, no actual governance process. And this is, I guess, this is the key thing to be thinking about with blockchain technology going forward. It's like, okay, you might have designed an infrastructure that does not rely upon centralized intermediaries, but you simultaneously need to design governance systems that actually enable people to have some kind of real ability to interact and sort of change it or have some kind of say in it. Is that kind of roughly? Okay, so you see these are ambiguous situations. Okay, let's quickly move away from all those things I just said there were kind of, I guess, meta critiques of the idea of decentralization and why you should maybe like not be automatically convinced that decentralization leads to empowerment. Now, this here, what I'm about to go into, is more specific to some of the claims made in blockchain technology. So one of the sort of key elements of the technology is that you can add things to the distributed database, but you cannot take anything away. All right, so if you think about an Excel spreadsheet, you might think about that as a database, but you know with an Excel spreadsheet, you can input data, and then you can overwrite it, right? You can change it, you can edit it, and you can shift it around. A blockchain system, it is a database system, but the key thing is you can only add to it. You cannot take anything out, right? There's no editing process. There's only an altering process, right? So to alter anything, you have to just add more things in. Now, this was one of the sources, one of the original claims that it was empowering because you cannot tamper with this. So in terms of the sort of claim to empowerment was tampering with information is the thing that damages people, okay? The act of tampering. And now if you think about the sort of the original libertarian philosophy to some extent in this, the idea was powerful entities try to change things, all right? They try to manipulate and shift stuff, right? And this is the abuse of power in a system takes place through the changing of things, okay, and sort of, or retracting of rights. There was never really a sense that the act of editing could be the act of rectifying problems, all right, the other way around. So with blockchain systems, you really, really rely on the information going in not being subject to power abuse, okay? Because if the information going in is being influenced by powerful entities, essentially then it's irreversible. So you have hard-coded abuse. Okay, you cannot change it once it goes in. So imagine a rigged election which was somehow managed to be recorded on a blockchain database, you would not be able to change it, okay? So this is actually an ambiguity about whether you want to change information or have the ability to rectify information, or you want no tampering. Is that kind of roughly clear? Sort of, and I guess this is like something some people have only sort of worked out now. It's like, okay, if we start to put these types of technologies into situations where there's poor data management, for example, how do we know we won't get essentially bad information hard-coded forever on a system you cannot change? All right, and how do you make sure? So if the nature of the database is like that, you really need to design very, very robust protocols around it. And this point about contract fetishism, this is another element of the same type of issue, but a lot of the original rhetoric around blockchain was we will be able to mutually contract with each other, and these contracts will not be able to be changed. Okay, so this is empowering. They cannot be tampered with. Now, if that's true, you really, really better hope that the people engaging in contracts with each other have the same level of information and the same level of power. But if you know anything about market systems, it's that people do not have the same levels of power. Barclays Bank's lawyers have a hell of a lot more power than the average business that they're selling swap contracts to, okay? Barclays' lawyers are the ones who write the contracts. They embed their own interests in the contracts. It's only through the legal system that more vulnerable parties can actually go and contest those contracts and say, can you rectify this? And this goes back to this Leviathan point. And the original Leviathan concept wasn't just that the sort of third-party institutions protect contracts. It's also that they were arbitrators between people. Okay, so they would sort of say, okay, I'm going to judge on this situation here. You're in the right, you're in the wrong, and we're going to change something. And this is what's happened with a lot of liberation movements in the past, is they contest contracts. All right, so you go in, contracts that were put in place, for example, by a corrupt regime, you change the regime and you break the contracts. And this has been going on throughout human history, for example, when there's peasant revolt movements, when they break debt contracts. So I guess the question you want to ask yourself is, are irreversible contracts really a good thing? Or can contracts actually be used to solidify power? And I would tend to say, historically, contracts are used by powerful parties to ensure their own interests. And if you cannot break them, well, you're potentially in a difficult situation. So some of the claims around these, I guess, smart contracts that are being made, you might want to sort of see through that lens. Let's pop to the next question. Okay. Now, having sort of spoken about the kind of the decentralized infrastructure and this inability to change stuff, we might want to look at actually at what are blockchains currently being used for. Okay, so you have the decentralized infrastructure, but you can use a decentralized infrastructure to recreate business as usual. And a lot of sort of observers of blockchain technology right now are seeing that actually what it's being used for is pretty much just to do exactly the same things that anybody else in the corporate world does, just in a decentralized form. So there's a whole sort of body of critique around this. And if you want to look at the trajectory of how blockchain technology has progressed, I've sort of written in a slightly obscure way here, but hopefully it makes sense. The original Bitcoin protocol, the key thing was, how do you make information scarce? Okay, now this is like a bit of an obscure thing, because the way we've done it in the past is through intermediaries. So for example, the reason why we trust the money in your bank account is that you believe that the institutions that protect that or sort of hold that information cannot just arbitrarily change it as and when they will, right? We believe that they've sort of created, there's a certain reality to the information that they put down. And that kind of makes us think about that information almost in object-like terms. So it's like, I have 500 pounds in my bank. It's like, you don't actually have that. You have an information record that says that, but you think about it like an object. And the reason why is that you believe the processes around that information have objectified it. Okay. In the Bitcoin system, essentially there's actually it's very difficult to put information onto it. It makes information into a commodity-like, object-like form. which is why people have this like imagination of these like coins moving around. Of course, there are no actual coins. There's just information being recorded as data. But we can sort of mentally conceive of it as these physical objects. And this is the sort of these information protocols that turn information into these concepts of like tokens, right? Once you create that sort of informational commodity, you can then start to move them between people. And this was the sort of second big thing in Bitcoin. It's kind of a trading of these tokens, these objects. The third big element that started to happen was, once we've created these tokens, can we start to make them avatars or symbols for other things? All right, so a lot of the original sort of second wave of blockchain startups were saying, okay, could we use this token that we're moving around the system to represent, for example, some kind of file or some kind of like other thing somewhere, to create like a one-to-one relationship between this digital artifact and another digital artifact, okay? And so a lot of the startups like Ascribe, for example, we're trying to find ways to take digital artworks and sort of commodify them through this process, so to create a digital token that represents the digital artwork. The next sort of phase of that was to apply that to the physical world, to say, okay, let's take these digital tokens and somehow fuse them into the real world. And this is a big sort of hot area right now, is this idea of fusing blockchain technology with the Internet of Things, okay, such that, for example, you cannot start a car unless you have some kind of, how do you describe it, a cryptographic token of some sort that will enable you to start it. So basically making things in the real world unusable unless you're interacting with the digital system. Okay, and that's the key thing of how you fuse the real world into a digital world, or into the matrix, as it were. But if you look at this, though, this is pretty much what corporations are trying to do anyway, right? They're trying to basically make commodities out of digital artifacts and physical artifacts, and to create them, turn them into markets. So a lot of what's happening right now in the blockchain world is essentially this. And the question I guess we want to ask ourselves is this essentially becoming a tool for automated private control, or is this really actually an infrastructure for some kind of collective emancipation? And I don't really have the answer to this, but it's sort of worth dwelling upon. I want to kind of end fairly soon, so let's try and go through the last ones. Okay, has this kind of like been roughly clear so far? Some of these points are like kind of obscure, but okay, this is another obscure sounding one. This is a problem we find in the blockchain technology community right now, and the technology community more generally. Okay, so this is something to consider when people make claims. Top-down technology. This technology is top-down in the sense that it's been developed in places like Berlin and London and New York by essentially global elites. Okay. It's then presented to the world as being something you use to solve social and political problems. Okay. Now, when I say inorganic problems out of context, a lot of the talk that I hear, for example, I go to blockchain technology conferences, and they say stuff like, blockchain technology will solve corruption. Now, superficially, it seems to make sense. It's like a technology that we've designed will solve corruption, okay, because of transparency. This is like completely inorganic, though. It's taken completely out of context. If anybody has actually studied anything about how social systems work, you realize that something like corruption is not a technological problem, or it's not like something you solve. Corruption is something that emerges from the structure of your society. It's to do with your socio-economic situations, your levels of education, your ability to obtain opportunities in the society. There's an entire sort of structural layers to what that leads to corruption. Merely putting a technology into that does not solve corruption. Actually, what's more likely to happen in this scenario, if you put that technology into that context, is the technology will be corrupted, right? Because you're putting it into a situation which is where it's likely to be used for that purpose. So I guess this is the point to think about technology more generally, is that you have to think about it in a kind of holistic context with other things as well. By itself, it doesn't really do anything. It can't really solve problems. So that's kind of just something to dwell upon. And the other sort of element of this, going back to the sort of libertarian philosophy, is part of the problem in libertarian philosophy is that the state is imagined as an external violence, or some kind of like external entity that exists outside of people and then exerts its will on people, right? So think about the language that's used. It stops my liberty, it steals my taxes, it does all this kind of stuff, right? Whereas if you think about how state systems actually work in modern day times, state systems operate through a lot more subtle processes than violence, all right? State systems are essentially held in people's heads. All right, they're held collectively by entire populations by the way that they think. The state is not an external entity that can be sort of solved. It's like an entire mindset and way of living. Okay, and this is something when you're thinking about issues like corruption, they cannot just be sort of engineered away. They're sort of endemic to the way people think and operate in society. Let's go to the last section. I'm going to end with this here because this is a very what's it called? A current example. Have you guys seen this example? This really illustrates to me a lot of the ambiguity of blockchain technology. So the DAO. Okay, who wants to describe it? Because I've been talking a lot. Does anybody have like a good description of what the DAO is? The decentralized. Who's that? Sorry. Yeah, it's essentially like they're trying to create like a sort of almost like a decentralized venture capital fund that's controlled by the investors who put money into it. Okay, go check out the website. It's very interesting. Sorry, Karen. But I just like loved. I was just amazed when I saw this. It's like the DAO's mission to blaze a new path in business organization for the betterment of its members, existing simultaneously nowhere and everywhere, and operating solely with the steadfast iron will of unstoppable code. I mean, like, the first thing I thought is like, how old are these people who wrote this? Are they teenagers? And I'm sorry, I mean, that's kind of like a mean thing to say, but this to me just like, I spend a lot of time with international development people, people who work in activist movements, and this would just be laughed at. I mean, this is like, it's like a computer game or something, right? Like, nobody says that stuff, unless they're like in a very particular community. This is like weird as well. It's kind of like, exists for the betterment of the members through this unstoppable code, but like, well, what if the members want to change the code, right? Like, who designed the unstoppable code? Was it the members who designed the unstoppable code, or do they have any say in the code? Like, what? It's like immediately bizarrely ambiguous to me. And you sort of, again, we go to this the principles put out by the DAO, and you have democracy as obviously a key one there. Non-aggression. The non-aggression principle is the key element of conservative libertarianism. It basically means you cannot tamper with my property. And it's the core distinguishing factor between a social anarchist project and a conservative libertarian project is this principle. It basically means the community has no right to tell me anything. All right? You cannot try exert your will on me. And this is the underlying conservatism of that vision. And this is something. And so you've got to think about all these terms. The context that they use is a very particular context. And actually, this organization, whilst apparently being highly democratic, essentially it's kind of plutocratic, actually. The more money you have, the more say you have in this organization. All right? It's kind of a certain type of democracy if you have a certain type of mentality. And I just want to end off with what's called the group of the curators of this group of this organization. Kind of like look at these principles quickly. And now let's look at the curators of the people who are sort of, I don't know the exact definition of their role yet, but who will be selecting projects to be submitted to this, to collective voting on the system. All right. Now I know some of these guys, and these are the curators of the global democratic system. Do you notice anything about this group? They're basically a bunch of friends who hang out together at technology conferences, and yeah, they've got a certain demographic profile, and you really might want to think about whether this truly represents an authentic social movement. All right. This weekend, I was hanging out, or spending time with people who work in Venezuela as activists on politics, people working in India, doing real community action about authentically fighting systems of power, all right? They're not these people. And I don't mean this to be some kind of personal attack, but I really think it's quite telling the fact that they haven't actually worked out that this picture might contrast with those apparent stated principles that they, in the page before. Okay, I've talked too much now. Let's open up the discussion. And it doesn't have to be questions to me, by the way. We can have a sort of like an open sort of, yeah, discussion about this.
Wow, great. Thank you so much.
And just one thing to clarify, I am, in principle, actually quite positive towards blockchain technology. I just want to throw out some things to be thinking about if you are dabbling in it, to be just a little bit more, but I don't want to be like a downer.
Yeah, no, I guess we'll get to this point. So if you read this UN paper, there is like the last paragraph is quite positive. Yeah, I can assure this. But can you switch back to this checkboxes? I really like this because they checked the values they already like implemented into their code, which is very nice. But first of all, thank you so much. I mean, this was like, yeah, a lot of points in just short amount of time, and I really liked it. I think we can like switch to one of these points back and forth and so on. Are there any urgent questions? I'm sure there are. Okay, just please wait till I get to the mic to you. Can you maybe introduce yourself a little bit, just a name, or you don't have to, of course.
I'm Tor. I just want to ask for the last thing to clarify a little bit the word, because DAO is actually a term, decentralized autonomous organization, where you're introducing like the DAO, which is one instance of a organization without explaining the term first.
Yeah,
sorry. A little bit confusing for other people, maybe.
Do you want to clarify it for us? Okay, yeah. So that's a good point. The concept of DAO was essentially a kind of a programmed entity, and we didn't really go into smart contracts and stuff like that, but essentially a kind of an organization that could operate autonomously. And it's actually very ambiguous as to how this organization in blockchain technology, or like what these organizations would actually look like. It's more kind of like a theoretical concept. But essentially an organization that exists without leaders and can somehow do things for people. And then this particular thing here, the DAO, is a group of people who've attempted to create such an entity, and they've claimed the name as well, which I'm sure is probably controversial in the blockchain community.
And would you say that this is like the first example of one of these organizations, because you picked that out? Or?
I don't know, what do you guys, I mean, has anybody looked at it than me?
Who knows other examples? Wait a second, I'll be with you in a second.
So, thank you, Brett. I don't know how closely you looked at the decentralized autonomous organizations, but what I find interesting is that the critiques that you mentioned before, or the risks that this programming system, this pre-programmed rule set of games for a whole society or a whole system contain, is what they want to build in practice. So, and what it reminds me of is the film Tron. I don't know if you have an idea of that. A completely pre-programmed organism that takes over governance of the whole world. And then people somehow try to manage to get into this organism, into this digital organism, in order to figure out how they can stop it, how they can change the rules within a system that writes the rules for its own life. So it's the autonomous organization can become something like a living organization which you cannot stop, and which can become very powerful on the basis of the code that you have once written. And if a bunch of programmers, as you showed us, writes a code for an organization which can not be stopped, which cannot be changed from externally. So you can only change it within its own rules, but you cannot change the rules of its basic principles. Then this organization can become very powerful and very risky in terms of like this Tron body, which can control the world. And I think this is I think the idea is that we can build it in a way that it cannot be cheated, that it cannot be, so that we can trust it, right? But on the other hand, if you cannot cheat it, if you cannot interfere, and if you cannot start a revolution against that system, right, then you're fucked. If the system goes corrupt on the basis of its own rules, because you have written democracy in it, and at a certain date you find out, okay, democracy was not the best thing to do. Now we're some steps ahead, but the system cannot stop democracy because it has only learned that. What can you do? And this is the big risk, and maybe also the big, let's say, the interest or the fascination, let's put it like that, the fascination of people who build those decentralized autonomous organizations on the basis of a blockchain.
And I guess this kind of goes a little bit back to the point I was saying about open access without open governance. So I think the most interesting stuff maybe going forward with blockchain will be, okay, we have these concepts, but like how would we simultaneously build safeguards or systems that enable people to have some kind of say? This is a problem you find in open source philosophy more generally, because Bitcoin code and a lot of these projects are codes open source, and the imagined political process is that if you don't like it, you can just fork away, right? There's a certain level of debate that can happen internal to the coding system, right? Between the techies, not necessarily between the people who actually use the system. But if you don't like it, then you can fork it away. The problem about forking is that it doesn't work in the context of network goods. Nobody wants to fork away because there's been loads of attempts to fork away from Bitcoin and nobody uses it because Bitcoin has harnessed the first mover advantage in a network system. Okay, so it's not in anybody's interest to actually fork away from it. And for those who know, forking is like using the same code to implement a new version of a system. So forking is actually it's like a pretty crap way of doing politics in an open source system. So what you really need is a really good second layer, or these kind of like check layers. A bit like in government, you've got this sort of the executive, judiciary, and the parliament who can sort of move off each other. I can almost imagine maybe with systems like this, trying to develop checks and balances to stop the system from getting out of control or becoming disconnected.
But do you see this coming actually?
Well, I guess the curator in this here is actually an attempt to create a kind of an external body. But as I sort of mentioned, there's a problem in with the sort of demographics of that.
We can talk about diversity too.
Yeah. So you got to think about, okay, how would you design? I mean, obviously they're trying, but how would you actually make a good curator system?
Cool. Any more? No. Wait a second, please.
Thank you. So, Laurent, it's just a comment, is not a question. I really like all the question you raise. Really great, great presentation, great. I would say almost philosophy on the blockchain. Very good. I don't like the end on the DAO and Ethereum. With the DAO, you are very, very tough with them. The poor guys, they are 2 months old. So give them a chance.
Yeah. No.
They maybe look like teenager, but well, they have some idealism that I hope could be a reality. So I think all the questions you are raising are excellent, and I think the conclusion is how we connect with that and how we do something new in the governance, in politics with that. But we cannot exclude them just saying they are nice guys but totally out of the reality, because in fact what they are working in Berlin on that, there is a team called GNOS, if I remember, and they are working on what should be the governance of the DAO. To be honest with you, I think that the first steps are wrong because they are monetizing or think that financial bet is the answer to any decision, any problem, which I don't share at all. But they are working, trying, and I hope we should connect. You just say we need a curator, an external, and this I totally agree. What is the we need to I think to include this blockchain neutrality if we can control the techies, and provided we can also have external bodies, how to say, analyzing through governance, critics, but in a way to be also included in this new technical arena.
Guys, please wait for the microphone. So the question was, how are they called? And you please answer that again.
Sorry, I didn't.
No, I just repeated the question. What was the answer to it?
I think it knows. I will tell you in a few seconds. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean,
we put that in the show notes.
probably been too harsh on them. But having said that, though, I think you underestimate the sheer amount of cultural power that people like this have. Like, we're not talking about, marginalized individuals here. We're talking about essentially the technological elites of our society. And they might be nice people, and I have met several of those individuals, right? And I'm not it's not really like a question about their personality. It's about the de facto fact that these are the people who politicians refer to, the media refers to, everyone goes to for advice on how the future of society is supposed to be. And there's a certain kind of, I think it's worth actually like sometimes punching it down and being like, okay, sort this out, because the reason what I find interesting about this, and again, it's not necessarily fair, but I for a long time have been involved with various social movements, and there's a lot of learned knowledge, long traditions and histories of how you do political campaigning, and they're rooted in real struggles and real things that people don't use terms like revolution lightly. These are actual, but there's a certain kind of childishness about the language here mixed with a lot of power and the individuals. And it's a bit like, when you find an American general who's completely disconnected from reality, but also happens to control a squadron of jet fighters. It's like, you kind of want people who are in positions of power to be like thinking deeply about this. And maybe that's why I'm being excessively critical towards him. But I take your point. I'm probably, they're cool people to hang out with.
So we have several people want to say. Just one question: is there directly a comment to the DAO or a question? There are two of them. Okay, then I'll come to you first, and then we go here, and then I'll be in the back.
No, that's not necessary. I'll take it. That's creepy. Okay. I got one comment for the DAO, because there's like $100 million worth of Ether existing right now, and I think it's like 200 million of those are already invested in the DAO.
Yeah, it's like $150 million equivalent.
Yeah, but that's, it's a significant amount.
It's
like
a significant part of the Ethereum ecosystem, yeah.
Exactly, and since everybody's talking about like Bitcoin is last week and now it's Ethereum, maybe you can experience a similar hype coming to it. And especially, the DAO is just the first example, obviously, but if you look at DAOs and all the kind of things you can do with it, and if you kind of program the right values into it, and this is obviously a subject to a debate, then you might actually change society to the better, or at least with some context and discussion before it.
Yeah, sure. If you do, yeah, totally. Well, one thing I might want to add is in this presentation, what I've done is what a lot of quasi-philosophical people do, is they sort of extrapolate out extremes. In reality, most people are kind of like, even if they say the extreme things, might not or actually act like that. And an example of this is like smart contracts. There's all this talk about smart contracts, these kind of autonomous contracts that can sort of self-executing. If you look at smart contracts in a silo by themselves, they can be quite terrifying. It's like you want to create this class of these sort of self-executing things that cannot be changed and so on. And I was sort of saying that, right? But of course, that's a sort of a philosophical critique of the sort of absolute position. In reality, how these things would probably be used would be in the context of existing legal systems in mixes with stuff that already happens. So I doubt you'd see our entire system becoming based on like the DAO or like smart contracts. These will probably be incorporated within our existing society and used in different contexts. So maybe getting alarmist about, you know, the world being taken over by an or decentralized or, you know, autonomous institution. Yeah.
Please wait a second. Can you repeat this, please?
Now we're trusting lawyers with the contracts. Is that better? It's just a separate kind of elite.
Yeah, sure. But maybe it's good to have two elites rather than one.
Okay, thank you. I could collect this comment too.
Yeah, I think kind of touching on the thing about the demographics of the people making up the DAO, like, and that's a more general thing about the entire fintech community, and that's kind of what worries me. Like, it's not even a question of like, yeah, that I'm sure they're not malicious people, but unless you have a diverse community, you simply cannot understand the problems. Like, if you say you're trying to make the world a better place, you actually need to have people from every environment who have direct experience of those things. And I think, but that's something that really baffles me. I don't quite see how any of the action that's going on at the moment in the community is going to lead to that, because everything seems to be sort of angled towards like drawing in the same kinds of people from who have the same. Yeah.
So that's I'm always jumping to these like ideological answer things, but actually there's a problem in conceptions of freedom that you find in libertarianism, which is something is free if it's open, if nobody stops you, right? So it's like if there's no bouncer, it's free, all right? But you know, the actual people overtly like pushing you away and stopping you is only one type of stop. And the kind of this notion of negative freedom versus positive freedom is sometimes used. So negative freedom is just nobody stopping you, whereas positive freedom is actually being able to act on this. So in the case of like gender, you know, like you walk past a bar full of like men leering out at you. Like, you can go in, but you're probably not going to go in, right? There's actually like an invisible wall there that's almost like a bouncer, except it's not visible. And so in sort of a libertarian philosophy, it's not there. It's open, it's free. And yet, strangely, you find these like existing power structures replicate themselves everywhere. It's like, well, exactly. Like, that's how power works. Like, it's not just these like overt like aggression that does it.
It's those barriers, the invisible ones, that are actually much harder to overcome, because
Yeah, the comment was that these barriers, the invisible one, are the ones who are much harder to overcome. Yeah. Okay,
Okay, hello, I'm Rike. Thanks for the excellent talk. It was very interesting, and it's very refreshing to actually hear a bit of a critical point of view on the blockchain in general, because I have the impression that it's the tendency at the moment to praise it and not be critical. So I think you made a very valid point on governance and Bitcoin, and my question is, after seeing how it was very difficult or not even possible to increase the block size, how do you think is governance and going to evolve in the blockchain or in the Bitcoin sphere? Is there a way of combining the decentralized feature of blockchain technology and like implement some governance mechanism, or do these two not go together at all, or what's the solution? How is the block size gonna increase someday?
So what's the solution?
Well, maybe that could be a question people want to like actually think about, because it would be really interesting to know what the solution would be. Because could you design a system which had, let's say, like multiple elements that had to be there before it was started? So obviously Bitcoin was started from, we launched the code and then it like replicates how it's going to do it. But you could think of launching a system that had multiple components to it to start off with that actually balanced each other somehow. As it sounds a bit like conceptual right now, but I'm guessing you could do that. You could say, if something happens in this system here kicks in. And so, for example, if the price of this thing goes up, some new system kicks in at that point and does something to change it. So do you need to build a new system overall, or could you implement this within Bitcoin?
So the question was building a new system or implementing?
I mean, a normal human society, what people do is that they get together and they discuss it, and then they decide to change it. And then if you believe in that process, then it's fine. If you don't believe in that process, well, then you don't. But yeah, I don't know the answer. Maybe does anyone else have an answer to that question of how you would design an efficient governance structure for Bitcoin?
There are no answers to this question? Because we have a question right in the back. If you have a short answer to this very easy question.
I mean, there's no right answer to this question.
You gave the answer already. The system of Bitcoin is pre-programmed, so it wasn't programmed into Bitcoin in the beginning. You can't program it into it later on. It's very hard with with these kinds of systems to change the program afterwards. So the only way to do it differently is to fork Bitcoin, which is the crap way maybe, or to build a new system. And then you need to implement these new rules from the beginning. And then we come again to the point of the power replicates itself. Who is financing the guys who develop those systems? And what kinds of rules can we expect?
Thank you very much.
And this is like, maybe a thing to think about is like implementing a open source protocol into essentially a society that is full of closed source concentrations of power. Your open source system tends to start to like replicate those. So actually in the case of an economic system, people with access to capital and skills dominate de facto. Probably capital more so than skills, but venture capitalists decide what gets to be developed.
So we have a next comment here in the back.
So a DAO just means that you have a token sale, and then everyone who buys a token has equity in that organization. And you can design the DAO to have voting equity, or you can have, you can design it many different ways. In this particular one, there's also a group of custodians who also approve or disapprove of certain actions. But a DAO is a general purpose tool to create an organization based on decentralized equity. So this particular DAO, the group that is a custodians, a lot of them are core Ethereum developers, but I think they would actually welcome, radical diversity if it were, available. In the way that the system was built, they wanted to attract the best developers in the world, the best cryptographers, and that just reflects the social structure of society. It just happens, computer scientists just in the world just happens to be mostly male and white. If there was one female, she was too busy for this DAO. She got pregnant. So, it's partly a reflection of just who's available. I think those terms, those values, they are kind of like maybe too grand. But I think they come from a perspective of computer scientists. From a computer science point of view or a blockchain point of view, there is democracy. There is a little bit of transparency. So it's not like they're trying to reach for like the grand social themes. It's more just like they're coming at it from their perspective. And I think that I think this space needs more people, like diversity in general. And it's kind of about getting over that hurdle of adoption and getting more people to be interested in it and having more hackathons and like trying to get more people interested in the blockchain and come up with ideas and build dApps and decentralized applications on top. Like I know this seems like really, really wrong, and like I have a friend who also works in this space, and she saw all the custodians, and they're all like white male and like really young, and it's really super annoying to her. But it's partly just a reflection of just the developer pool that was available, and that's also partly like about teaching more women to code and all that stuff. So it's sort of a long, like big social project.
I'm not necessarily saying it doesn't come from. Although I did ping Stephen Tual on Twitter when I was just like, it does look like a bit of like a bro fest from like your mates, and
yeah,
it wasn't taken seriously, but obviously not. But like, I mean, it's just to be honest, I totally get your point. But from a like PR perspective, it's a pretty like it's a bit dubious. You need to get a PR person to sort out that image problem, because if I was running an organization, I'd be like, that looks really bad. Like, I really got to like sort that out, and so. But I totally get the point. And it's complicated, obviously, because these this is something in technology startup communities more generally has this issue that any individual startup doesn't necessarily feel that it's their responsibility to solve all the world's problems, and that makes sense. Any small group of humans doesn't think it's like it's up to me to solve the problem of global diversity or like, you know, these things. But of course, collectively, when you look at the entire sector, you see that everyone's done that. And it's like, oh, so this, you have replicated the exact structure. Like, that's what you have done. Like, that is how the structure replicates, is through that process of everyone individually deciding to replicate it, with nobody perceiving any responsibility. And this is a really hard thing to deal with. So yeah, I don't know. And that then leads to the capital accumulation among those guys rather than somebody else, and that will maintain the system even further. So breaking that is difficult. Anybody who knows how to break that will be very useful.
It's a direct comment to that. A lot of previous comments. What about your comment? Is it a direct comment? Okay.
I mean, I'm an example of that process as well, right? I'm the one standing up here, and I'll get flown around the world to do talks and stuff, and I'll get a big social media profile and so on. There's many other people who know about this stuff who won't get to do this, you know? So it's not just something that's unique to technology.
Thanks. Hi. Again, thanks for the speech. It was extremely interesting. In relation to the question that came before about integrating the cryptocurrency into the banking system or the other way around, and what do we need to do in order to allow this happening. So from my point of view, this could never happen because of the nature of the, or not never, but not soon, because of the nature of the ideal behind cryptocurrency by itself. So as you said, if you're coming from a background of social movement, if you're coming from the underground, the first thing that represents it, that nobody agrees with no one, and you have hundreds of different opinions which are contradiction each other from their point. So my vision would be more of, it will be a perfect example of organized chaos, where it will be broken into groups of people which will have some certain trust relation, as Ludwig said before, because that's currently the main problem with coming up with a system which will unite everything under one roof. We don't trust each other, we don't trust the developers who stand behind those systems, we don't trust the banking system to take it to a nice place. So if we would trust, there are coins like Faircoin, and there are a lot of nice initiatives which are coming to create smaller communities, which is by itself a beautiful ideal of decentralizing and going a bit, taking a step back from globalization as we know it into more smaller communities that creating their way of trade. So to answer the question, for my personal opinion, it's not just it's impossible to integrate two contradicting systems because they're wrong, they're not coming together by its nature, and it would be creating a new system, but it would not be just one. I think that we're really, from my point of view, we're really taking a step back from our term of working all together, and there will be just parallel ways of encoding those beautiful codes and recreating through fiction. So.
Maybe you're channeling the kind of social anarchist perspective, the federated networks of molecules perspective, which is a much more prevalent in social movements. But yeah, that's actually, I mean, actually, this is one of the interesting questions going forward. That's what my UN paper was on. That was, you know, having been aware that a lot of blockchain technology has potentially got some dubious values, or maybe can be abused in certain ways, and that often is being used for straightforward rent extraction or straightforward commerce. Are there like authentic ways that actually it could be used for scaling up certain types of communal activity? And bear in mind, look, I'm also aware that the existing corporate sector is like, compared to like the GlaxoSmithKline, or the massive corporations of the world, it's not like it's some giant injustice being done by people using the blockchain to make some money. I mean, I don't really care. I mean, fine, like, but then it shouldn't be claimed that it's profound. It's like, well, you're just using it to do the same old thing. All right, there's nothing particularly interesting about it. It becomes particularly interesting when it's used for something authentically different. And that's maybe like the question thing is like, is that technology actually useful for creating, I don't know, federated networks of people engaged in. Yeah, some kind of thing like that. Yeah, those kind of anarchist visions. And that's hard to know.
We can dig into that deeper for sure, because we wanted to talk about the positive sides too. But we have 2 more comments.
Hey Brett, I'm Peter, and thanks for the presentation. I think it was really, really interesting. I particularly liked your last slide where you talked about top-notch, top-down technology and inorganic problems. So I want to add to the question, when does blockchain become interesting? So if we see Bitcoin as an instance or implementation of blockchain that apparently worked, sort of. So you can actually buy physical goods with Bitcoin, and you could argue that in that sense it reached its goal. If we think about other instances like remittance or citizenship, identity or land ownership and so on, a lot of, directly in my mind, coming from a charitable foundation, a lot of problems come to my mind. So privacy, the cementing of current power structures, what you talked about. So is there a way to think about blockchain in a more structured way and to look at issues or subsets of problems or groups of problems, however you want to call them, and try to identify in which areas blockchain might be more worthwhile, more interesting, more useful than in others? And do you have any idea about that?
Well, there are people who are doing that right now. So, I mean, you know, having made my sort of kind of philosophical rant about some of the, if you extrapolate some of the visions to their furthest extremes, in reality, a lot of people right now are not ideologically, you know, completely bent on changing, like implementing it everywhere. There's a lot of people who are like sort of looking in quite a pragmatic sense, saying, okay, cool, like, just like any other technology, could we use it in certain positive senses? So for example, I had a call with some people from, it's called the United Nations, the one that coordinates the body's Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. And they got a research project right now, which is saying, quite critically, they're not sort of evangelical about it, just saying, okay, could we use it for managing databases between all our different operations? Because right now, for example, in a certain type of, you know, there's some kind of like disaster relief program going on. There's a whole bunch of different institutions who are all trying to like coordinate. So having a shared ledger system might actually be interesting in that context. If you're adapting it in certain ways, they don't know yet, but they are thinking about that. So yeah, there are experiments going on. I think there's some interesting stuff that could be done with like voting. That could be an interesting, or governance, these sort of like decentralized governance systems, people actually using the blockchain to record votes or sort of opinions. Those could be interesting. And that's it. I don't have any problem necessarily with the use of it for straightforward trading and stuff. I just don't think it's particularly profound. Some of the stuff I find like most dubious is around the Internet of Things stuff. But I find Internet of Things dubious anyway. So that, and implemented on a blockchain system just makes it even, it just adds a different element to it. But like, I find there's a lot of like quite frightening stuff happening on Internet of Things experimentation. And I think it needs to be a lot of critical thought going into that world, because there's a lot of attempts with Internet of Things startups to sort of commodify as much stuff as possible and sort of automate, create markets in places there's never been markets before. And so that's one of my areas of concern in blockchain right now. But yeah, one other point I just wanted to make about when you think about these critiques, this critique was kind of made in a silo. Like if I just sort of zoom in on blockchain, I'm just like look at its internal dynamics and critique it. But there's a different type of thing I can do, which is comparative. So in the case of Bitcoin, for example, I do a lot of work around the normal banking sector. That's my original thing. It's actually like straightforward finance, like mainstream finance. And one of the main reasons why I like the fact that Bitcoin exists is because it's the one potential counterpower to the bank-dominated system. Okay, that does not mean that I love every element of Bitcoin itself. I just like the fact that it's not the bank system. And you can think about this with a lot of the other technologies as well. It's like, well, okay, sure, like you don't necessarily have to like the blockchain stuff, but could it be form a more diverse system, a counterpower, as it were? So that's another angle you could think about.
Which also means if you imagine that in a region where you do not have this cartel, as you also called it, these huge power finance system, then it's not like someone that challenging that system, or like Bitcoin is not challenging that system, but maybe it would be more important than to actually stabilize the financial system and not to implement some blockchain-based services. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's different things people need in different situations, you know. So getting all like ideological, like it has to always be one thing. I mean, some people, yeah, you need to rebuild banking sectors and places. You know, like it's. I mean, in the UK, where I am based in London, I mean, you have a domineering financial sector that just like dominates everything. It's got so much political power. In that context, I like anything that tries to sort of dilute its power. But that doesn't mean I want to apply that exact same thinking to a situation where your banking sector's fallen apart. You know, so. I think, in general, pragmatic thinking about different contexts is useful.
Okay, one more comment here, and then two more, and then we should somehow get to the drinks, I guess.
Hi, I'm David. I used to work in banking in various countries, but my claim to fame is that I launched Russia's first mobile banking application 10 years ago, before app stores and any kind of standard.
Cool.
And so I look at blockchain as some really exciting opportunity, but you hit the nail on the head. Why is it that there's not more discussion about Bitcoin being sort of like the ability to challenge the status quo and having all these pyramid structures where everything could be decentralized? Not saying that it's possible, but why aren't we talking more about that other than what we're doing here? Why is it not getting more mainstream attention? Is it still because of the fact that it's still technical, or still the finance thing, or?
I don't know.
You don't know?
What do you think?
I think the answer is...
Laurent, wait a second. Here you go.
I'm a stupid banker. I think the answer is very easy: regulation. Speak to the startup in Berlin. What is the most important hurdle? Regulation. There are a lot of ideas, but regulations. Nevertheless, I think it's coming relatively quick, because first regulators are looking at it, but even part of the regulators, you have already communities, products, meaning proof of reality. What I regret very much is that I very much like your approach, which is to have a counterpower, to have critics, to have, it's very human, and we need it, so please continue. But on the other side, sense, we need to, how can I say that? We need to integrate this debate, I would say, in the blockchain system. Because if you stay aside, you will be a critic, you will be an observer, a clever one, raising good questions. But as you say, how do you modify, how to improve, how to influence a decentralized network? And this is a crucial question today, because as I say, they are very, very young, and I wish they succeed, and I like them. But they could be in 3-5 years maximum very powerful. And if we just stay aside, what is the world which is automatically almost built there? And where do you put the human aspect? So I think Conscious Fintech is to put the human aspect in the blockchain. How do we do that? And then we come to the DAO, because I fully agree with what you said. Come, join the thought, join the ideas, bring diversity, and let's build this governance that we need, desperately need.
Totally, yeah. That's it. I mean, I guess the key thing is to engage with the processes positively, but also critically. And I guess that's a lot of people who critique technology tend to just critique it and then sort of stay away. Well, I do like to sort of have a balance between critiquing it, but whilst also taking part and trying to actually influence it in some ways, which is why I spend a lot of time with communities. So maybe that's the sort of a thing everyone should try and do, is to sort of have those dual roles all the time. Because I guess if everyone in the sort of tech sector actually did that, you would design really interesting technology. You know, it would be actually, yeah. Hopefully we can get there.
Okay, then let's have one more question over here.
Hi, Max. Thanks for a great presentation first. Basically, I want to say the same thing. One thing maybe I missed was about transparency and how actually blockchain can help fight the cartels, the oligopoly. So basically not destroy the state, it's very extremist, but just make it more efficient or take away corruption. That's, I think, is the most powerful thing we're looking into. So from a very pragmatic way also, not just revolutionize everything, but change systems that are really existing, are inefficient, makes them more efficient, more transparent, and get the power or the righteous power, as the state actually says, back to the users.
Yeah, and I think there are situations where, like, you know, those technological changes can make a difference. But as I said earlier, it's always worth thinking about holistically about problem solving. And I guess in technology, and I don't mean to be like too critical towards technologists, because obviously everyone in a specialized situation has their own worldview in the way they sort of operate, and they have to do that. But there is a tendency towards this kind of solutionist sort of mindset, which is, I see the world as solutions. I just implement solutions, and there's very little thinking about the trade-offs and the feedback effects from those, which is, so any like critical entrepreneur, what they should really do is be thinking about, okay, I've got an idea for a solution for something, but how is it actually going to be used, and what might be the feedback from that process that I haven't anticipated. And if people did that, that would actually change a lot of the culture of how technology is implemented. That simple sort of second process. So not just the solution, but you think what a lot of technologists are doing are solving problems created by other technologists. So this is something, you know, you design technology, it creates certain conditions for social structures to emerge that then create problems. Then you have to put new technology to solve those problems, and then you can do the same thing over and over again. The whole time there's a venture capital cycle going on, which is like extracting profit from that process. So this is a kind of an issue in sort of economic systems. So yeah, if we were thinking ahead holistically about how technology works, would be interesting. Maybe that's something that this group can be at the forefront of.
Yeah, just to bring it down on a concrete level, I would like to ask you, what do you think about the Honduras example then? So I think Fatcom, as a US-based company, I think, they have a deal with the government of Honduras to solve the land record problem.
Maybe it'll work. I don't know. Has anybody seen that?
It was
cancelled.
Yeah,
I thought it was cancelled. But they're down in China doing something. They're trying to do a similar system in China, I think.
Do you know the reasons for it? Okay, then wait a second, please, before I start to talk.
I forget if it's on the blockchain, but there's an e-Estonia program where you can create an identity in Estonia. If you know about that, is it? Anyway, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's cancelled. Sorry, that was my comment.
Okay, but you know that it's cancelled. That's a very good information. Thank you so much.
So Factom was trying to implement these, essentially using the Bitcoin blockchain, I think, building a layer on top of it whereby you could record transferal of land title, and then relying on the Bitcoin authentication process or consensus process to underpin that. So they were one of these groups using the existing Bitcoin infrastructure rather than trying to implement their own blockchain systems. But yeah, I mean, it could be useful. I mean, who knows?
Too early to say.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, we got one more comment here.
Yep. Hi, I'm Jeff. It seems a bit like this kind of grand scale implementation of any blockchain managed central financial system would not be able to do much except for just kind of build an alternative to the traditional banking system, where it kind of takes over in spots where the traditional banking is absent, or where it just adds a layer for people who don't like the traditional banking system. But in essence, it kind of shares the valuelessness of the financial system as we know it. It seems, because you can, like, transparency and democracy, they are values in a way, but they're such broad values that they don't actually mean anything. And it seems that these kind of visions of it taking over the world and entering the political debate, I don't see that there's a high risk for that, except for in this kind of crazy technocracy vision, because in a way, the way we interact with each other is more on values. That's the way we do a democracy, is an exchange of value-based arguments and not on efficiency or tit-for-tat exchanges. And so I was wondering if there's any kind of clear examples of where you know, or anybody else here knows, of any positive social impact that these kind of currencies had, or that you only see that in more kind of localized, small-scale currencies that are more based on values that people share. For example, like the Bristol pound or whatever you have in Kreuzberg here, or something like that.
Well, I've got a lot of enjoyment of using Bitcoin. I mean, I really enjoy using Bitcoin, actually. I find it fun. I bought a 2-year subscription to my email service like a few months ago with Bitcoin. It was like, I just really enjoyed it. So it's like, I get a certain buzz off it, but you're right, it doesn't really, it's pretty much the same feel that any banking transaction has. As an aside though, just bear in mind, Bitcoin doesn't actually challenge the banking sector at all. This was a common misconception in the Bitcoin community. All that Bitcoin does is creates a payment system. Like, payments is like one element of banking. The true power of banks is credit. The banks dominate the payment system because they dominate the credit system. They create the money supply. They are the money supply. All right. So merely creating another payment system does not disrupt banks. And so if you were truly authentically trying to create an alternative financial system based on crypto, you'd have to design financial institutions as well around it. So that's just a sort of a point. I think that's starting to get understood now. Yeah, I mean, I work on other alternative currencies that are not crypto, and a lot of them have different values. A lot of localist economic currencies, they don't have the same critique that Bitcoin has of the systems. They're often trying to sort of replicate or sort of re-engineer a local community, which is not the same as what Bitcoin's trying to do, which is, they're complementary in the sense that the critique of centralization, the one way you do it, it has this, like, this big anarchic global network, or you could retreat back to smaller scales, communities. So you could actually imagine Bitcoin and small scale local currencies both being against the existing central structure, but just different implementations. But there's definitely a very different feel to it. And I'd also say that the community currency, or the original alternative currency communities, which includes like mutual credit systems, local currencies, all these kind of things, monetary reform groups, have a much better understanding of money than you find in the Bitcoin community. Because what they're having to do in proper local currencies is actually figure out why people use money and actually create the social conditions via which people will use money. What happened in Bitcoin, which was interesting, was the form of the money was created before the actual community. So it was like, we created these tokens, and now we will like throw them into a community and hope that they're used. So it starts from the superficial form of money and then tries to engineer its use after the fact. What most community currency engineers do is try to create the underlying conditions. So for example, in the hub here, you could say, we have all these people who have particular needs. We could implement a currency system here that actually sort of coordinates them, and you would start from that perspective rather than just like starting a currency system and then trying to find the people to like put it in. So it's definitely worth exploring the other alternative currencies to get a sense of how Bitcoin is different. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the homework. Okay, we'll explore that. No, thank you again for the great talk and for taking so much time for us here. It's great to have you here. Thank you guys so much for sharing your knowledge and your questions and your comments. And I hope we can do that again in the near future. And I hope that you, somehow had some aha moments. So I had them, of course. So what I take with me, for example, is that we should be aware of the ambiguity of the whole system. Like, this showed me your presentation a lot, and that there are different groups of people that have different interests within the system. And if we disempower the central authorities, who will be the ones who are in power next? And yeah, so thank you very, very much again. And I would like Jan to flip the slides one more time again. Thank you, Brett Scott, again. Give it up, please. One round of applause.